Greetings, YouTube. The Doctor is in. Dr. Urias Papers here, coming at you with another commentary on Dungeons & Dragons. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, hit the like button. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave a question or comment. All right, it is time for another installment of the Doctor Spell Prognosis. Today we are talking about the spell Find Familiar. This is a superior spell. That it means it is getting a rating above an A. It is also in the broke category, but that's okay. We like broke for power gaming. It is a power gamer's dream. All right, so let's go through this. It is only usable by wizards, but there are so many ways to get this first level spell that it is great and easy, and I have used this with so many different builds. So, it's a first level spell. It has a casting time of 1 hour plus 10 minutes if you're using it as a ritual. And it is a ritual spell, which means the wizard can cast this out of their spell book without having to memorize it. It has a range of 10 feet. It has a verbal, somatic, and material component, which is 10 gold pieces worth of charcoal, incense, herbs. So, you got to burn them. This is the only kind of drawback of this, is every time you cast this spell, which you're going to have to cast it kind of often depending on what you're doing. You are going to have to spend 10 gold pieces. But, I mean, at higher levels, it doesn't really matter. And this spell never loses its utility. It's a conjuration spell. So, you gain the service of a familiar, which is a spirit that takes the form of a bat, cat, crab, frog, hawk, lizard, octopus, owl, poisonous snake, fish quipper, rat, raven, seahorse, spider, or weasel. Appearing in an occupied space within range, and it has the statistics of the chosen form. We're going to go over these as well. Though you can make it celestial, fey, or fiend. It acts independently of you. 1. So you tell it to do stuff, and it does it. But it always obeys your commands. In combat, it rolls its own initiative and acts on its own turn. Okay, that's pretty important. So, to tell it to do something, to me, doesn't look like it requires an action whatsoever at all. To speak is free. So, you tell it to do something, it must obey your commands. It always obeys your commands, and then it does its thing. A familiar can't attack, so it can't take the attack action. But it can take other actions as normal. That's important. Okay. When it drops to 0, it disappears, and it's gone. It reappears after you cast a spell. Again, as an action, you can dismiss the familiar to a pocket dimension, and or you can just dismiss it forever. And as you can, while it is temporarily dismissed, as an action, you can bring it back within 30 feet. And then it leaves behind in its space anything it's wearing or carrying. While your familiar is within 100 feet. So this is another thing that makes this great. One is, it has an action, and it acts on its own, and it's got its own initiative. That's a really important thing. I've seen some DMs play this spell where it acts on your turn. That's okay. It doesn't really matter, but it's got its own initiative. It does its own actions that it can attack, but it'll follow your commands. Now, second great thing about this spell is while your familiar is within 100 feet of you, you can communicate with it telepathically. Additionally, as an action, you can see through the familiar's eyes and hear what it hears until the start of your next turn, gaining the benefit of any special senses that the familiar has. During this time, you are deaf and blind with regards to your own senses. So this thing can go essentially as far away from you, and you see through its eyes and you hear through its ears. You can't have more than one, and if you cast a spell again, it just changes the form. And then there are some special familiars, particularly in Adventure League, that you can get like a write-up for, such things as like a pseudo-dragon or a quasit or a imp. Finally, so third really great thing about this is when you cast a spell with range of touch, your familiar can deliver the spell as if it had cast the spell. Your familiar must be within 100 feet of you, and it must use its reaction to deliver. So it's got a reaction too. It must use its reaction to deliver the spell when you cast it. If your spell requires an attack roll, you can attack. You use your attack modifier for all. So that's a little different. So it has to use its reaction to deliver the spell. This is not as great as it sounds, by the way, because it still has a range of touch, which means that your familiar has to touch something. So, and it has to do it as a reaction. So that's not that great. Now, what I do want to point out, most importantly, if you don't already know, is this familiar right here. So there are a number of familiars that fly. So the bat flies. And the bat has echolocation, which means it's got blind sight of 60 feet. So you can use that blind sight. And then it's got keen hearing, and it's got a bite attack. It's only got 1 hit point. So it's there. Each one of these things has something good. There's a cat. It's got okay stealth. It's got an advantage on wisdom checks for smell. That's not that great. There's a frog, which doesn't really do a whole lot. There's it's amphibious, so it can breathe underwater. There's a crab, which can also breathe underwater. So you can use it to scout things underwater. There's a hawk, which has keen sight. It has a fly speed, but it doesn't have a flyby attack. So if it flies by something and it leaves its space, it's going to get an attack of opportunity. There's a lizard, which has a climb speed. There is an octopus, which is amphibious, and it has an ink cloud. And so this thing can be used to scout underwater. I'm going to skip the owl for now because we're going to come back. There's a poisonous snake, which has blind sight. There's a fish, which can be used to scout underwater. So those are always important things. Seahorse can be used for underwater. There's a raven, which has a fly speed and can do mimicry, but it doesn't have a flyby. It has a fly speed of 50 feet, though. There is a seahorse, which can breathe underwater. So for scouting underwater, there's a spider, which has web walking, has a climb speed, has web sense. So those things can be usable. And there's a weasel, which has advantage on checks for smell. And it's got a halfway decent stealth. Now, the owl. That's the one I want to pick out. Owl has flyby attacks, or the flyby feature, which means it doesn't provoke attacks of opportunity when it flies out of an enemy's reach. It also has advantage on perception checks that rely on hearing or sight, and it has 120-foot dark vision. +3 to perception is not that great, but with advantage, it makes it pretty good. Stealth of +3 is not that great either. It has a fly speed of 60 feet, okay? So it has a really good range. Now, the reason I point this flyby out is for one particularly great reason. It can use actions. It just can't use the attack action. Well, it can use the help action. Alternatively, you can aid a friendly creature in attacking a creature within 5 feet of you. You feint, distract the target, or in some other way team up to make your ally's attack more effective. If your ally attacks the target before your next turn, so this thing flies adjacent to something, does the help action, distracts it, flies away. If your ally attacks the target before your next turn, the first attack roll is made with advantage. I've used this as the pocket owl with a rogue build to get advantage with elven accuracy to really take advantage of that so that I can get crits a lot and crit fish for that sneak attack damage. That's really where it comes into handy. The pocket owl could also be used for builds like a paladin build where you're going to smite evil and you get you have advantage on attacks and you can get you can fish for crits. Basically any fish for crits. So they can always do the help action. When you take the help action, the creature gains advantage on the next ability check it makes to perform the task you are helping with, provide that it makes the check before the start of the next turn. So this thing can help you with perception checks. so it can hoot and point and whatnot. So that's another great thing. Now, the only thing that it really can't do is this thing, because it's got to do this spell. It can deliver spells with a range of touch. It's got to do it as its reaction, which it's got to deliver the spell as a reaction, which means it's got to be adjacent. So, and then it can get whacked. So, yeah, I wouldn't really suggest doing that. However, the owl can do a help action. It can scout out. You can see with its stuff within, a long distance. You can see within its sight, and you can see within its hearing as well. And it's got dark vision 120 feet. So again, this spell is awesome. I use it for a lot of different builds, particularly with builds where I'm trying to crit fish. And I've already done a video about familiars before, but this is a great one. And if you have a chance of taking it, I suggest you take it, or you create builds around it that use it to utilize and to build on those builds themselves. So, all right, that's what I got for everybody today. I appreciate everybody tuning in, and I will catch everybody later.